Hello, this is Harry. I'm doing a project on civil rights movement. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981. The 9981 Executive Order was to make sure in Army there would be no separation or segregation in between black, white, race, color, and origin. In 1954, the Supreme Court decided the case Brown v. Board of Education. It meant that it was now illegal to segregate schools. They said, "We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." In 1955, Rosa Parks started the Montgomery Bus boycott. It started when Rosa Parks sat in the black section of the bus and refused to give her seat up to a white person who wanted it. She was arrested. Other blacks stopped riding the bus in protest, which caused the bus service to shut down because they ran out of money, because they didn't have enough riders. This caused the bus service to change their rules to allow blacks to sit anywhere they wanted. In 1957, the Little Rock Nine became the first students to attend a previously all-white high school. President Eisenhower sent U.S. Marshals to guard the students from injury. In 1960, black students started sitting at Woolworth's lunch counter. The workers at Woolworth's refused to serve them food. This started similar protests all across the South. Eventually, they began to be served because they were taking up space and stopping Woolworths from making money. In 1961, Freedom Riders went around the country to check if the Interstate Commerce Commission rule to segregate bus stations were being followed. Some upset white Southerners set their buses on fire and did other acts of violence against the Freedom Riders. Freedom Riders were both black and white people fighting for equal rights. In April 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama. While in jail, he wrote a letter in support of nonviolent protest and civil disobedience. He stated, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." In August 1963, Dr. King organized a march on Washington. Over 200,000 people were there. He gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech there. In November 1963, President Kennedy was killed in Dallas, Texas. The civil rights community was nervous that a new president from the South would not support the civil rights movement. In 1964, the 24th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, banning poll taxes. Whites made poll taxes to make sure the blacks could not vote because most of them were poor. In 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. It turned out that President Johnson was 100% with the civil rights leaders. The Civil Rights Act extended voting rights and outlawed racial segregation in schools, at the workplace, and facilities that served the general public. In 1965, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act to ensure that all voters were able to vote, especially in the South, where blacks were often stopped from voting by old laws called the Jim Crow laws. In 1967, Thurgood Marshall was appointed to serve on the United States Supreme Court by President Johnson. Marshall became famous because he argued in the Brown v. Board of Education case. Thurgood Marshall was the first African American to become a Supreme Court justice. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Though many laws were passed and good was accomplished during the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s, Dr. King believed there was much more to do. Sadly, his life was cut short at 39 years old. In In 1983, President Reagan established the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday. The holiday was made because Dr. King helped change our entire country's feelings and laws about civil rights with no violence. On this holiday, we remember the past and promise to work hard in the future and achieve his dream. This project was done by Harry Leo Orth II and his dad, Michael Orth.